In October 2009, many of us in this room gathered together to discuss the pros and cons of Ohio's adopting the Common Core academic standards in English language arts and mathematics. That was the beginning of a process that ultimately saw the Ohio State Board of Education officially adopt the core in June of 2010. This was a significant decision in the history of education reform in the Buckeye State because getting academic standards right, specifying the knowledge and skills that teachers should teach and children should learn, is at the heart of just about everything else in K-12 education. Or, as the American Federation of Teachers has observed, abundant evidence suggests that common, rigorous standards lead to more students reaching higher levels of student achievement. In short, standards wield significant influence over what happens inside classrooms, and the Common Core standards are a step up in quality for the state. In joining 45 other states in the District of Columbia and committing itself to the Common Core, the Buckeye State has made a commitment to ensuring that all students graduate from high school with the core academic knowledge and skills necessary for success in college, careers, and life. For the benefit of their futures and that of their community, state, and country, it is a fairly audacious commitment, but absolutely the right one for our children. I say this as a father of 2 young daughters enrolled in Ohio public schools, but there is a lot of work to be done to meet the opportunities provided by the Common Core. A significant first step was taken last November when the State Board of Education voted 18-0 to approve Ohio's joining the PARCC assessment. PARCC promises to develop assessments anchored in college and career-ready expectations that will provide an honest picture of how well our students, schools, and systems are achieving in mathematics and English. By making an early and forceful decision on joining PARCC, Ohio has given itself an important head start in the enormous amount of work involved with rolling out new academic standards and everything associated with them. This includes creating a revamped statewide accountability system that is aligned with the new content standards, new curriculum, and testing protocols, and ensuring that professional development and teacher preparation programs are suitably aligned. Taken as a whole, this amounts to an entire system reboot, a major undertaking, but worth the effort if it leads to higher performing students in the Buckeye State in coming years. Most of this work will fall on those of you in this room and across the state who are superintendents, curriculum coordinators, principals, and classroom teachers. As State Superintendent Stan Heffner told me back in August, the successful implementation of the Common Core will depend entirely on the state's teachers and their commitment, ultimate buy-in into this effort. America's top educators and experts, a few of whom are in this room with us today, have helped design the Common Core, but it'll be the teachers who have to actually implement it well. No one knows the opportunities and challenges of this moment better than State Superintendent Stan Heffner. He's been at the forefront of the nation's effort to create and now successfully implement the Common Core standards and all that goes with this effort. Ohio's lucky to have him leading the department at this pivotal time in our state's education history. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Stan, and please welcome Stan Heffner. There he is.
All right, thank you, Terry. Those of you who know me know I really hate standing behind these things, so just wanted to wander around a little bit. But first of all, thank you very much for having me be a part of this program. This is probably, without an understatement, going to be one of the most historic things that we do in education in the history of this country. Putting together not only high achieving and high demanding kinds of academic content standards that really stretch children and show them just how much they really can learn, but also to give us the ability to compare ourselves not only across states, apples to apples, but also to see how well we as Americans are doing against the people who are investing in their schools to compete against us in the economic world. So this is a huge event, and I'm just very pleased and proud to be a part of it and to join the Fordham Foundation and our other sponsors in having an opportunity really to discuss just what these mean and what our next steps need to be in order for us to be successful. Now, before I go any further, though, I would be remiss if I did not recognize and ask to stand. We have members of our State Board of Education here, and I wonder if you would just stand up so people can see who you are. The President of the Board of Education, Debbie Turhar. I believe we have Angela Thie Bennett. Oh, there's one vote. But you have Jeff Mims. I believe Mike Collins is here. Kristen McKinley is here. And Danny Green, members of our Board of Education. Dennis Shelton. So thank you very much. Did I miss anybody? I hope, because I've only lost one vote, so that's enough. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate that. Okay. So I want to just start some brief comments this morning with one simple premise. The reason we're in this business and the reason we engage in the professional work that we do is that we believe all children not only can succeed but must succeed. We are pledged toward those ends, even though the degrees of success and the choices they make and the fields that they encounter will be different. But we know that whatever their choices, there are some key fundamental, foundational knowledge and skills that they are going to need in order to be successful in whatever that choice may be, and it is our duty to provide it. So how well are we doing in doing that? Well, there is some good news, and I don't want to be here bashing schools. This is not what this is about. So, for example, we've got some reasons to celebrate. We know that in the Ed Week, which is I think many of you are probably familiar with Ed Week, but it's a national professional journal. They have a quality counts index that they use to rate and rank the states. I'm very pleased to tell you that last year we were 11th in the nation, and this year we've moved up to number 10 in the nation. So Ohio has made great progress and continues to outshine many of the other states. Secondly, I can tell you that we are a race to the top state. There are only 19 of those awards nationally. In the conclusion of the first year of effort under the grant, we received reviews from the U.S. Department of Education. There were 2 states that were particularly singled out for exemplary progress that were made under the grant. One of them is run by my good friend, the Commissioner of Education of Massachusetts, Mitch Chester, those of you who remember Mitchell. But we beat him. And Ohio really was ranked, when all was said and done, although there's not an official ranking, it was pretty obvious that really Ohio stood out as the state that was the role model among all of them in the race to the top. And we have now qualified for a second race to the top grant, a $70 million plan to help us really work on making sure that our kids are successful when they enter school. So we have an early childhood race to the top grant. But that's a little outside of the scope of today. And then finally, out of the 614 districts, we have 352 of them that are ranked as either excellent or excellent with distinction. Now, I want to make 2 quick points. These happened because the people who work in these schools are working their hearts out. They are totally committed and dedicated, and they are doing everything they can inside the system, playing by the rules that we designed 20 years ago. We put a system into place, and we haven't really allowed it to keep pace with the changes in our state or in the American society as a whole. So you might argue that they have grade inflation, and certainly there is a degree of that. But it is also because they are working hard in a system that lets them down and shortchanges our kids. The system is in need of fixing. We cannot continue to maintain a system that was designed in an era before the internet even existed. Ohio really needs to get modern. If you think back, this whole system that we currently have was an outbirth of Senate Bill 140 in 1989. And at that time, particularly the business community was very concerned that we were issuing diplomas to people who didn't even have the basic fundamental skills that an 8th and 9th grader would have in reading and mathematics. So we created what we called the learning safety net. And we put proficiency tests together to make sure that these kids are in fact proficient. But they were all aimed at a minimum level of performance. Then, to see whether or not the schools were actually even doing that, we put together an accountability system that has a trigger that says on a scale, all the tests is 400 on a scale score, but what it really means is that We only count the number of kids who go over the low bar we create. But we don't have anything in this system that rewards them when they go further. So the learning safety net worked, and the idea was good 20 years ago. It does not work today in a more increasingly technological society and one that is much more highly competitive than the one that existed at that point. I will give you an example. There was a Great Recession in 1994, those of you who remember it. Jobs were lost. When the jobs came back, and they came back later that year, so this was about a two-quarter real prolonged problem. When the jobs came back, they came back from technology-based operations and internet, this new concept. And the jobs that were lost were the jobs that were able to, people were either able to outsource them, they could digitize them, they could automate them. Those jobs never came back at all. The jobs we've lost, the 600,000 we've lost in the last 10 years in Ohio, and by the way, thanks to our governor, we have at least about 70,000 of those back. We're coming back, but the jobs that are out there are not the jobs that were lost either. So clearly, an 8th or 9th grade minimum competency system disserves our children and will not prepare them for life after school. And it is our job to make sure that that occurs. Now here's how we're shortchanging them. In Ohio, we have 5 performance levels on our state tests. So proficient is the mark. We got to count how many kids get to at least the minimum on proficient. But what does that really mean? I'll give you a couple of quick examples. In 6th grade reading, basically, kids have to get just barely over a third of the items right to be considered proficient. Why? Because the system was aimed at the minimums. It wasn't related to just reading. If you go, we just pick 7th grade math, same thing. Here you have fewer than a third of the items correct in order to be considered proficient. Now, I don't know about you, but I tried to use this argument on my mom when I was in school, and she didn't buy it either. So we know that there are some problems. Now, what about advanced kids? Have we been at least challenging and stretching our most gifted and our most capable kids? Well, let's take a look. Let's just take the high school test in reading. You have to have a minimum score of 79% of the items correct in order to be considered advanced. For many districts, that's a C. If you take a look at mathematics, to be advanced, you've got to have 77%. All right, well, so what does that mean? How does that translate into practice? We took a look at how these scores on our test scale against the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. And NAEP, as you may recall, is the national report card. It kind of really says, because it's an apples-to-apples test across all of the states, and it kind of gives us a rough idea of how the country as a whole is doing. When we take a look at these items in blue, these are the Ohio Achievement Assessments. And these are the percentages of kids who scored advanced. I call particularly to your attention, I believe it's 8th grade math, where over half of our kids are proficient. When we scale this to NAEP, the real percent of where a college and career trajectory test will tell you they ought to be, 51% becomes 3%. In other words, we're sending false positives because the system that the kids need is the one that prepares them for our choice of careers or college. The one they're in rewards minimums and does not incent people to go beyond the least. So that becomes a concern. And that's why we have to take a look at this system differently, and that's why when Terry made his very generous introduction, he talked about the process we had to go through to really say enough's enough. It is time to look at new content standards and think about new performance levels that are going to be necessary. We need to move from minimum competency to a concept about being college and career ready. So very quickly, in its simplest forms, to be college ready means that you have the knowledge and skills in English and mathematics that you can be admitted to any school, community college, 4-year or whatever, and be able to be placed in a course where you're earning college credit without having to take remediation in advance, period. Why is that important? Because last year, 41% of the kids who went into Ohio's public universities required some form of remediation in either English or mathematics, because the minimum competency system does not talk to higher ed. 41%. A cost, ladies and gentlemen, of $147 million that came out of their Pell Grants and out of their Stafford loans. Further exacerbating the problem, because we know that the longer it takes for a student to earn the first college credit, the less likely that student is to finish college. And does anybody in here know what the average remediation rate in colleges is in Ohio? 70%. The dropout rate, University of Akron, ladies and gentlemen, get this, is 91%. So we're, for lots of reasons, and it's not all academic, but when we send kids on to the next step and they're not prepared, shame on us. In career ready, it basically means the same thing. If I'm going to go to get a career, I may have to go to college. I may have to have on-the-job training. If you go to the Department of Jobs and Family Services, go to their website. Type in the search box, top 50 jobs. So their labor statistics will show you the top 50 jobs in Ohio, the ones that will pay a wage of at least $50,000 a year, allow somebody to raise and support a family, and to advance in that chosen career. Of those 50 jobs, 43 require some form of post-secondary education, and the other 7 require some form of on-the-job training. So a high school diploma by itself is not sufficient, and clearly the ones that our students are earning today are also not sufficient. So we know that classrooms of the future need to change. They need to reflect more of what the current, what the world of work looks like, and what the society that students live in looks like. So, classrooms of the future, currently, I don't have to tell you, they're very teacher-centered. Kids sit in rows of hard plastic desks. In fact, that's the definition, I'm told, of a student is somebody who sits in a hard plastic desk all day and watches old people work. Instead, this needs to be a much more learner-centered operation. Students need to become less the receptacles of knowledge and more the pursuers of knowledge. Teachers need to be less the dispensers and more the facilitators. We have to step up more with our use of technology and use the power of technology that students use right now. They're on technology or devices on an average of 7 hours a day because they multitask. The equivalent is 10.5 hours a day. They are on them for social and entertainment purposes. We need to harness that power for their learning purposes. That needs to happen. I'm just going to skip that one in the interest of time. So we know that the new content standards have to reflect these realities. The current system is letting kids down. It does not reflect where we are as a state or as a country, and they surely are not preparing our kids as well as they need to for the future that they're going to inherit when they graduate from high school. So let's make sure that they have a diploma worth owning. So, new content standards were developed, and I am pleased that 46 states have embraced the Common Core standards in English and mathematics, K through 12. And we're making sure that under our Race to the Top work that our preschool academic standards, the ones that are going to lead up to kindergarten readiness assessments, are going to be embraced not just by public preschool, but by Head Starts, private providers, and others. So that we have a clear articulation. And here's what we learned. First thing is, we had low standards, but we also had just a ton of content. So teachers don't get to teach. They have to basically robotically process things getting through all the days, because heaven forbid, the one thing that they don't touch on in the multitude of standards will be the one thing that's on the test. In fact, you never saw teachers so happy as in the last day of testing and the FedEx truck leaves. And the most common thing you'll hear people say is, I can teach again. Well, we need to change that. So we have fewer standards that are going to allow us to go more in depth and result in kids having a greater and deeper understanding about things. We are not going to repeat the same kind of content year after year after year. We're going to get smart, and we're going to be building on this knowledge. And we're going to be able to get more and more sophisticated as kids progress through the grades. So if there is a need to go back and make review, the review will be done in the context of the next thing to be learned. not sitting like we do right now in mathematics and teaching 5th grade math in 6th grade, then teaching again in 7th grade, then teaching again in 8th grade, then sending the kids to high school, which is what goes on too many times. Now, notice, by the way, I got to just stop. A couple of you are frantically writing notes. We are going to make this presentation available for download, so I should have said that at the beginning. Apologize. So if you are frustrated and you didn't get something, just know that you'll have access to this either through the Department of Education or through Fordham. All right. So we know that we'll have new focus, and that we're going to raise our expectations to truly and really provide the kind of knowledge and support that kids need in order to be successful when they graduate from high school. We will be focusing on both content and skills, because kids need to know how to do more things in life than bubble sheets. So you'll see that is blended in there. And then finally, all of these subject matter areas really they interrelate with one another. My staff loves this phrase, the eye of integration, which sounds like a Rocky Balboa thing, doesn't it? But all of our subject matter really is interdisciplinary, and it relates to each other. So that you're not learning math separately from English. Because if you really stop and think about it, that's not the way the world works. So the new content standards reflect that. And Ohio, by the way, has developed 774 model curricula for these areas. So there's lots of opportunity. All this is web-based, and teachers have a lot of resources available to them as we make this transition. Now, I'm not going to go through this slide either. All I'm going to really do is say that when the content standards were developed, and Achieve and National Governors Association and the Council of Chief State School Officers, ACT, and the College Board were all just really exceptional facilitators to make this happen. All of these things were well thought out, they were articulated, they were aligned, and they reflected international best practices. So what we basically got was the best of everything we knew at the time that these standards were done. Now, does that mean that they're going to be perfect? No, probably somewhere down the road we'll get version 2.0. But right now, these are head and shoulders over anything else that you're going to find in the existing state standards. And we've got work that we have to do. Now, we have many Race to the Top districts. We have about half of our state districts and schools are in Race to the Top. The other half are not. But everybody needs to make this transition. So in Race to the Top, you have scopes of work that take us to the 2014-2015 school year. But for others, you know, they're kind of on their own to be able to do this. We have provided, however, models of this, and so that over the next few years, we will get ourselves to 2014-2015. Now, two things about that I would argue, if you're able to persuade anybody. Grades K through 2, those content standards ought to be implemented immediately. There is no reason to wait for 2014-2015 because the kids who go through those grades are ultimately going to take that first test at 3rd grade, so they might as well be ready. And there's no testing. I would also argue, though, that I would not limit myself to these standards. I would say all of the new Common Core standards should be implemented immediately. Now, I know some folks are worried that, and here's what they'll tell you. They'll say, well, we don't have the money. Well, you know, these are web-based. In addition to that, we have professional development that the state is paying for. We're utilizing the educational service centers of the state. So 54 of the 56 ESCs are providing this professional development. And get this, not just where teachers have to go someplace, they're taking it to you. So they will come to your school, they will come to your district. And they will come and they will stay as often as they can. They're using materials that we have developed, and they are implementing those with fidelity. In addition to that, this is all web-based, so teachers can access this as often as they need to and whenever they need to, but it's really important that they start to see this now. What they'll discover is that if I'm asking more of students, then how can I possibly hurt them on the existing state test that asks less of students? I mean, it just defies common sense. There's really no reason to delay. But if you do, you have to be ready for this change in practice. Because I talked about content and skills. So it's going to take a lot more than just, I'm going to talk to you all day, here's the key terms, memorize them, get ready for the quiz. Now, I'm not saying all teachers are bad like that, but the system has to require a change in practice if we're going to do this. And I wanted to just touch base very quickly on a couple of key points. In English language arts, the focus is on literacy and the strategies of literacy that go from grades K all the way through 12th grade. The current system, generally speaking, most literacy efforts are aimed at preschool or elementary grades. There seems to be a presumption that by the time you get to middle school, that you know all this stuff. But the fact is that literacy skills, like any other muscle, if not exercised and practiced on a frequent basis, will atrophy. Right? So we just know that there needs to be focus on literacy skills. There will be a very strong focus on the use of, on the balance, I should say, of fiction and nonfiction. The content standards are basically organized around the NAEP framework for testing. So you're going to have a 50-50 blend in 4th grade, but by the time the kids get toward 12th grade, it is a focus on 30% literature and 70% nonfiction. So the kids can actually read and understand a manual, know what a will is, know how to deal with a mortgage, and engage in the other kind of activities that are going to be very important for them, both in their personal and in their work lives. And in mathematics, there's a huge focus that's going to be on why am I using this formula? So if I'm going to invert and multiply and I raise my hand, they tell me to invert and multiply when I'm dividing fractions, I raise my hand and I say why, usually you get one of two answers. One of the answers is it's going to be on the test. The other answer might be it's the rule. Neither of those is explaining to me, in my mind, the concept behind why I'm doing this. So I will remember to do this until the test, and then we move on to the next thing, out of sight, out of mind, gone. I don't have a building block, unless I remembered that was the rule, but I still don't know it in context. The new content standards really focus strongly on understanding the concept and why I'm doing this, and then really promoting reasoning, both in terms of show your work, but also asking students to explain in words the thinking they went through to get to the answer. Now, to me, these just make good common sense. And now we're finally going to provide teachers enough time. But teachers are going to need time also for some transition. This is why you need to start now. Here's the pass rates on the current state tests in blue bars. Based upon NAEP and some of the international measures that are aimed at college and career readiness, we anticipate and we project that if those changes don't occur now, by the time the 2014-2015 year starts, our pass rates will go from the mid-80s to the mid-30s. And it will be a huge wake-up call. I worry because I don't want people who are stunned by this to blame the test. Or as a good friend of mine says, if you don't like the temperature, don't blame the thermometer. We need to get ready now. And if we don't, then we have missed our real opportunity. So I'm really close to my time. Let me just end by saying this. I don't know about you, but I have been in this business for a long time. My star is going to fade because I'm not going to live another 35 years to give to this profession. But while I am here, I want to honor the thing that drove me all these years, which was that when I get the chance to be in a position where I can do something to make it a better place for our kids, I got to do that. I need to seize that day. Ladies and gentlemen, our day is here. The Common Core standards provide one of the greatest historic opportunities we've ever had to really stretch our kids, to show them that they can do things they never thought were possible, but for the fact that we challenged them and we gave them the supports they needed, and we were patient. If we can do that, we have an opportunity to leave a legacy and build a future for kids who will take what we do here today for granted when they are adults. And hopefully they are looking as far ahead as we should be looking ahead on their behalves. This is the real opportunity, not just for Ohio, but for our nation and clearly for our children's future. So I come here today, I ask for your help, I ask for your support, and I ask that you join us in making sure that the Common Core standards are implemented with fidelity all across Ohio, and that every one of our kids gets that chance for success that we all want. Thanks for listening.